Commercial property investment, one of the important part is the lease. How long is the lease? In this video, I am going to share with you short-term lease versus long-term lease and why short-term lease can be an important part as well. What you think is you need a long-term lease, but sometimes short-term lease can be a beneficial for you as well. If you want to know, then wait till the end. Okay, so let's look at it. Short-term lease versus long-term lease. In commercial property, when we are talking about short-term lease, is generally, let's say, below 5 years. So anything from 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years lease, you can call it as a short-term lease. Anything above, let's say, after 3 years, so 10 years, 15 years, and sometimes 20 years, these are long-term lease. Now, you as an investor sometimes would be thinking like, oh, I want to buy a 20 years lease, 20 years long lease, so that way it is, it's full secure. Sometimes that might not be the case, because what you are doing this by putting that 20 years, you are actually saying to yourself that, okay, next 20 years you are going to get the rent, but you will get a set fixed, let's say CPI increase, or is a fixed, let's say 3% increase. So every year your rent is going to go up 3%. But often in commercial property, what we have seen is that sometimes rent goes up, in the market goes up 10%, 15%, even up to like 20% in 1 year. So what you will be missing is what is called the market growth. That market growth you are not going to get. Let me give you an example. Let's say there are two side-by-side commercial property and one commercial property which has a short-term lease of, let's say, 3 years, and another one which has a 20 years lease. Now, of course, it is going to be lucrative, 20 years lease, let's buy this one. Okay, now you bought this 20 years lease. What happens is that in that lease it is written that every year the rent is going to go up 3%. Okay, fantastic. So every single year, let's say both at the start of this year, the rent started as 100,000, both properties. Okay, so the first year, of course, 3% increase, that 100,000, it is going to be 103, so both properties. Second year, again 103, 206 or little bit more. So likewise the rent is going up. Now on the third year and fourth year, this property which has the 20 years lease, what's going to happen? It is going to keep on growing that 3%. There is no way you can increase more, because that's how the lease is been tied up. That's how it has been written in the lease. So for the next 20 years, it is going to go up 3%. And you will be thinking like, wow, this is fantastic. Now wait, on the other side, the other property, on the left hand side property, let's say it is going after third year when the lease is coming to an expiry, then they did a market review. And during the market review, they realized that ideally the rent should be not 107,000 or 108,000, it should be 120,000. Oh! Remember commercial property, the per square meter rate in that market, about the building style and what kind of net lettable area is there. Let's say even the same both properties are same. So left hand side now it is going to be 120. So the tenant agreed, landlord agrees, and they sign another 3 years or 5 years lease, let's say. Now next 3 years, that from 120, let's say again it is going, let's say 3%. You see that on the right hand side they have already going below, and after 3 or 4 years, let's say again if it goes to another 20% in the market review, this property is getting more and more rent, whereas the right hand side property, because it has a 20 years lease, it is going to be a problem. It is not getting the exact growth that it was supposed to get. And that is one of the things that we need to understand in commercial property. Sometimes the longer lease, particularly the 15 years, 20 years lease, doesn't mean that it is a good thing. It depends on the property, but in my opinion, that 20 years lease can be a not so good if the growth of that property or the rental bump is the property is only fixed like 3% or something, as compared to sometimes the market growth, which is 10%, 15%, 20%, which it can be got if the lease is only like 3 years or 5 years. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you buy a property only 6 months of the lease left. So that kind might be risky as well. But what I'm saying is sometimes having like a 20 years lease cannot be a good thing, because yes, you are tying it up, but you might miss the growth. And 10 years down the line, let's say again with that example of these two properties, 10 years down the line where this property rent is 140,000 or 150,000, where this property which is tied up with only, let's say, 120,000. Remember that 20,000 extra rent that it is getting with 8% yield means this property somebody is going to pay 200 or 300,000 more, and that's the difference. 300,000 more you can get if you want to sell or if there's something happens for this left hand side property as compared to the right hand side, where you will find it is challenging because the rent is tied up with the lease. I hope you find this interesting, because sometimes we always talk about we need a longer lease, 20 years, 30 years lease, as if like once we buy and set and forget. Remember, if the tenant's business, they are not doing well, they will stop paying rent. If they stop paying rent, yes, you can put them to court and all. We need to see that what's kind of director's guarantee and what's the company's assets are there. There are so many, complicated things. So you need to check, in my opinion, that yes, a standard 5 years lease is good, but sometimes 15 years, 20 years lease can be harmful for you if the market rent is keep on going down even after getting the rent bump. I hope you find this video helpful. If you like this video, please do me a favor, like this video, subscribe my channel and turn the notification bell on so you get to see more videos like this, and it also help me to reach out to more people like you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.